Okay, so you're here because you want to really understand what makes it so challenging for women who are elected to local government in India, specifically within the Panchayati Raj system.
Right.
We've got this report here from the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, and it's dated March 2nd, 2025. And I think it's going to be really helpful to kind of shed light on what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a pretty significant report. It's not just like someone's random opinion or something. This came from a panel that was led by Sushil Kumar, who you might know, he was the former mines secretary.
Oh, wow.
They put this whole thing together following an order from the Supreme Court. And they really went deep. They talked to people in 14 different states.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking like Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Kerala, a whole bunch of places. So the insights that we're going to be talking about today come directly from state officials, from the women who are actually elected to these positions, and other people who work at the local level.
Okay, so this is like boots on the ground research. It's really, really interesting. Okay, so just to give everybody a super quick overview, because I know some of you might not be totally familiar with it, the Panchayati Raj system is basically India's way of having self-governance at the local level.
Yeah.
So we're talking about villages, and then there are intermediate levels, and this goes all the way up to the district level. The idea is to bring democracy down to the grassroots.
Right, to the people.
Yeah, exactly. And having women in these roles is a really important part of that. So what we want to do in this deep dive today is to dig into this report and uncover, like, what are the biggest obstacles that prevent these elected women representatives, these EWRs, from actually using their authority.
Yes.
We don't just want to like say, oh, it's tough. We want to understand why it's tough and like what are the real systemic issues that are going on.
Absolutely.
So let's just jump right in. What are some of the biggest hurdles that this report kind of brings up?
Well, I think one of the most fundamental challenges that this report highlights is that a lot of these women who get elected, they simply don't have any prior experience in politics. Right. They're coming into this world that they've never really been a part of before. And this is especially noticeable at the Gram Panchayat level.
Okay.
So that's like the village level council, the most basic tier of this whole system.
Right.
And it's understandable, if you've never been involved in the political process, trying to figure out how local governance works, trying to understand all the meetings and procedures, it can be really overwhelming.
It's like being thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, exactly. It's like being thrown into a game without knowing the rules.
Right, right. But it's not just about being new to the game, is it? This report also talks about some pretty deep-seated biases that are at play here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, gender-based discrimination is a huge barrier. The report really emphasizes that male elected officials and the government bureaucrats, they often just overlook the women representatives.
Really?
Yeah, and there's this clear preference, for men to interact with other men, both in formal settings and informal settings.
It's like the old boys club.
Yeah, kind of like that. And it might not seem like a big deal on the surface, but when you really think about it, this preference, it reinforces male dominance, and it really limits how much women can actually lead.
So even if a woman gets elected, her voice might not be heard.
Exactly.
She might be left out of important decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, that really defeats the purpose of reserving these seats for women in the first place.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting how the report connects these kind of discriminatory behaviors to even broader societal norms.
So this is not just happening in the political sphere. This is like a wider societal issue.
Right. It's very deeply rooted. So patriarchal socio-cultural norms, which are, still really strong in a lot of rural areas in India, these have a major impact on how women are able to participate in public life.
Right.
And we're talking about traditional gender roles practices like purda, which, is the seclusion of women.
Right.
These can discourage women from speaking up in settings that are dominated by men, like these panchayat meetings.
So it's like you're elected to this position, you have this power in theory, but then you face all of these cultural obstacles that prevent you from actually using that power.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not just about being ignored or not being heard. The report also talks about some much more aggressive forms of obstruction that women face.
Okay, this is getting a little scary now.
Yeah, I mean, political pressure, even threats are a reality for a lot of these women representatives.
Right.
The report talks about cases of coercion threats, even violence that's directed at them by political opponents or, powerful local groups.
That's awful.
And what's really concerning is that the no confidence motion, it's being misused as a tactic to specifically remove women from office.
Oh, wow. So they're finding ways to, like, get them out of the positions that they were elected to
Exactly.
because they're women.
Yeah, and this raises a really important question about what kind of support and protection these women actually have.
Right, because it shouldn't be this dangerous for them to just do their jobs.
No, it shouldn't.
It's really troubling. And it sounds like these challenges can be even greater for women who are already dealing with other forms of marginalization.
Oh, absolutely. The report makes a very clear point about that. It says that EWRs, from scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, minority communities, and women with disabilities, they face additional layers of vulnerability.
Right, so they're not just dealing with gender bias, they're dealing with all these other forms of discrimination as well.
Exactly. They have to deal with gender bias, and then on top of that, they have to deal with the biases associated with their caste, their religion, their ability status.
Right.
And then on top of all of that, there's the traditional expectation that women are primarily responsible for household duties. So it becomes incredibly difficult to balance those domestic responsibilities with their political responsibilities.
Right.
And then there's also the issue of financial autonomy. Societal norms and a lack of confidence can make these women hesitant to make independent financial decisions, even though they're in positions where they should have that authority.
Right. They're supposed to be in charge of budgets and things like that.
Exactly.
But they're being held back.
Wow.
So you've got women who are facing discrimination on multiple fronts. They're trying to juggle these really demanding home lives. They might not have financial independence, and then they're expected to succeed in these incredibly demanding roles.
Right.
It's just, it doesn't seem fair.
No, it doesn't. And it's like the report is saying, hey, we're putting these women in these positions, but we're not really giving them the support that they need to actually succeed.
Right.
And one of the things that the report points to is that there's a real lack of access to adequate training and mentorship programs.
Like they don't have anybody to go to ask for advice.
Yeah, they're kind of on their own.
Okay.
And without proper training on things like, governance and legal matters and leadership skills, they're left to figure it out themselves.
Right.
And, they're trying to navigate a system that wasn't really designed with their participation in mind.
So it's like being given this really complicated machine, but nobody gives you the instruction manual.
Exactly.
You're just supposed to figure it out, because that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Then there's also the issue of the rotational reservation system itself. Now, on the one hand, having these reserve seats for women, it seems like a positive step.
It does.
But the report seems to suggest that there might be some unintended negative consequences to the way that it's currently set up.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. So the idea behind reservation is to make sure that women get elected, right?
Right.
But the problem is that the current 5-year term for these reserve seats, it's often not enough time for these women to really gain enough experience and become effective leaders.
So they're just getting started and then their time is up.
Exactly. Just as they're starting to understand how things work, the seat might rotate out of reservation.
Right.
And then they have to start all over again, maybe in a different role, maybe not at all.
So it disrupts the continuity of the governance.
It does, and it weakens the long-term political impact that these women could have if they were given more time.
Right. It's like they take 2 steps forward and then they're pushed 1 step back.
Okay, exactly.
Okay, and then finally this report talks about a problem that I find just really frustrating, and that is the whole issue of male proxies.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one. So the report highlights the fact that the current legal system, it doesn't really have strong enough deterrence against male relatives acting as proxies for elected women.
Okay, so can you explain to the listeners what that means? Like, what does it mean to have a male proxy?
So basically what happens is that a woman is elected to office, but then her husband or her father or her brother or some other male relative, they basically take control of the decision making.
Oh, wow. So it's like she's the face of the position, but he's the one who's actually calling the shots.
Exactly. And they have all these different terms for this practice, like Pradhan Pati, which is the husband of the village council head, or Sarpanchpati, which is the husband of the head of the Gram Panchayat, or even Mukhyapati, which is the husband of the chief.
Wow, they have a lot of different terms for this.
They do, and it's because it's a widespread problem, and the report is saying that the current legal system, it's not doing enough to stop this from happening.
Wow, so it undermines the whole point of having these seats reserved for women.
It does.
Because they're not actually the ones who are in power. It's like a facade.
Exactly. It's a really serious issue.
Okay, well, I'm glad that this report is bringing it to light. But the good news is that this report doesn't just lay out all of these problems. It also offers some concrete solutions, some ways to move forward.
Oh, absolutely. It's not all doom and gloom. The report lays out this multifaceted approach to addressing these issues.
Okay.
So first of all, it stresses the need for strong policy interventions.
Okay.
Specifically, it recommends strengthening training programs for EWRs.
That makes sense.
And also providing comprehensive legal awareness initiatives.
Okay, so they know their rights, they know what they can do, they know how to navigate the system.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
On the structural side, the report recommends extending the duration of reservations for women in these local bodies.
So instead of 5 years, maybe make it 10 years or something like that.
Yeah, or explore different ways of reserving the seats that allow for more continuity.
Right. Okay,
Right.
so that's a good structural solution. And what about this problem of male proxies? What does the report say about that?
Well, the report is very clear. It says that there need to be really strong penalties for this.
Okay.
And strict enforcement of laws that specifically target these male relatives who are acting as proxies.
Okay, so like if you're caught doing this, you're going to be punished.
Exactly. The idea is to create a real deterrent.
Right, because without consequences, people are just going to keep doing it.
Yeah, and the report also talks about the importance of building up the individual capabilities of these women.
Okay.
So they recommend investing in mentorship programs, skill development programs that are specifically designed for women leaders in the Panchayati Raj system.
So things like leadership training, financial management training, public speaking.
Exactly, all of those things.
Okay, great. And then I see that the report also talks about changing societal attitudes.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge part of it. I mean, you can't just change the laws, you have to change the culture as well.
Right.
So the report recommends implementing widespread awareness campaigns to promote gender sensitivity.
Okay.
And this is about changing the underlying patriarchal norms and biases that are contributing to these problems.
Right, because this is a deep-seated cultural issue.
It is.
So it's not something that's going to change overnight.
No, it's a long-term process, but it's a necessary one.
Absolutely. Okay, well, this report is so eye-opening. It's really disturbing to hear about all of these challenges that these women are facing, but it's also really encouraging to see that there are solutions, that there are concrete steps that could be taken to address these issues.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just a matter of actually implementing them.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the lack of political experience, the gender-based discrimination, the patriarchal norms, the political pressure and threats, the socioeconomic disadvantages, the lack of training and mentorship, the issues with the rotational reservation system, and the problem of male proxies.
Phew, that's a lot.
It is a lot, and it's clear that reserving seats for women is just the first step.
Yeah, it's not enough.
We need to do more to empower these women to make sure that they have the support that they need to actually succeed in these roles. Well, I'm glad that we had this conversation today. I think it's so important to bring these issues to light and to talk about what we can do to create a more equitable and effective system of local governance in India. And, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question. What are the broader implications for society when a significant portion of our elected officials face these kinds of barriers in carrying out their responsibilities? Think about how strengthening women's participation in local governance could lead to wider positive changes within our communities, within our country as a whole. I think this is something that we all need to be thinking about and working towards.
I agree. It's an important question.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.